Wisconsin team that Ohio State
also beat.
Yes. So, and that's where you go. Okay. It's all about the playoffs.
Playoffs.
Hey.
Hi. How you doing?
Live television.
Oh, we're live. What would you like to talk about today, Matt?
Let's talk about the college football playoffs. I think that's what everyone else wants to talk about.
I am Brant Parsons still. That is Matt Murschel still. It is college football now, a Week 12 edition. As we get closer and closer. It's almost done.
It's almost done. I mean, but yet there's so much more that needs to be
Thanksgiving is a week from tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's just
Last week, the regular season ends next weekend.
Which means college football playoff rankings have begun to come out, and this week, I'll be honest, Matt, I thought it'd be a bigger shakeup. There was sort of a shakeup. Mm-hmm. Number 2, 3, and 4 lost last week, and one of them, or two of the three, are still in the top 4, Michigan and Clemson. Alabama, number 1. If any team out there controls their own destiny, it's the Crimson Tide. Ohio State, 2, Michigan, Clemson, Louisville, and Washington on the outskirts of that one. You and I have been talking a lot about this at this point. Alabama seems to be in control of their own destiny. They're in the SEC title game no matter what happens against Auburn. Even with a loss, I think, to Auburn, or even possibly even the SEC title game, I think Alabama is going to be the SEC representative in the playoff. Nobody else from the SEC has proven worthy of it. But if you look at this, the committee is setting itself up for some interesting scenarios down the road.
Well, you start out with Ohio State, as we were talking about before the show. Ohio State at number 2, one-loss Ohio State team, which really needs help to get into the Big Ten championship game. They have to have Penn State lose a game if they want to get a chance to get into that mix. What will happen if they don't? What happens if Penn State wins out? Penn State wins the Big Ten championship. Does a Big Ten champion Penn State team get in over a one-loss Ohio State team that could be probably a better team, so to speak, but lost on a blocked field goal? That'll be interesting. Then you look at number 3 with Michigan. Obviously, with Ohio State and Michigan playing next weekend, if Ohio State wins that game, Michigan's knocked out of the playoff discussion. We can all agree on that. If Michigan wins, that knocks Ohio State out of the discussion. But again, Michigan needs help, in a sense, when you're looking at
Michigan wins out. They're
in. But I'm saying
the question is Ohio State. If they win out and don't play for the Big Ten title.
Yeah. And then you look at Clemson, which controls its own destiny. They've got to win out and win the ACC to continue where they're at. And then you got Louisville at number 5, who's staying there thinking, we're just as good as any of these 4 teams above us. Why aren't we in the mix as well? They're upset about that. And then you got Washington, the Pac-12, could end up being the Pac-12 champion. I think what's going to be interesting for the committee is let's look at what happens when conference championships are worked themselves out. And does a conference champion get higher recognition than a one-loss team that's not a conference champion? And that's where I think it's going to come into play.
And that's going to be. And you were part of this. You went out to Texas and sat through all this. Mm-hmm. We always hear about conference championships being important. Well, now you have, this is all hypothetical, you have a team at number 2 mm-hmm. that may not play for a conference championship. You have a team at number 5 who may not play for the conference championship. How are they going to resolve this if those teams continue moving up? And have they dug themselves a hole by saying Ohio State 2 at this point?
No, I don't think so. I think what happens more than anything is if this all works out the way we've been talking about, if Ohio State gets left out, for instance, if Louisville gets left out, I think you're really going to hear steam pick up again for expansion. You're going to expansion of the playoff. They're going to people say, listen, we should go to 6, we should go to 8. I totally disagree. If you're going to expand at all, you go 6. You just add 2 more teams. I think what a 4-team playoff does is it really does make things exciting. Here we are the week before the final regular season finale, and we're talking about 6, 7, 8 teams right now that still have a possibility of getting into the top 4 spot. Like in the BCS era, we'd only be talking about these 2 teams. We'd only be talking about Alabama and Ohio State and how these teams can
basically
overcome
Alabama or Ohio State, Michigan.
Yes, and that would be it. So I think that's where we're going to see a lot of this. And I think this season is the first time we're going to really get a big test on the selection committee's process. And because it's there is one metric that they use to determine this, and it's not necessarily something they present to the nation. I think that's where we're hearing so much people wondering, how do you determine this? How do you determine, is it conference championships? Is it strength of schedule? Is it head-to-head? I think that's when we're going to really hear it at the end of the season.
We just spent how many minutes talking about that? Didn't talk about the Big 12 one time.
One time. Big
Not
12
one
is...
time.
And
we'll talk about them later, but
yeah,
not one time.
Not one time.
All right, we're going to do game predictions now, and the first game we're going to start with, Tulsa visits UCF on Saturday, 8 p.m. start. Both teams are 4-2 in American play. And if you think about it, UCF could be undefeated in American play. They blew 2 games, 2 big leads in games early in the year. They come into this one. This is might versus might. UCF top 20 in the nation in scoring defense, top 30 in total D. The Golden Hurricane, as they are known, come in at number 12 scoring offense, number 8 total offense. This is, like I said, might versus might. Tulsa's offense, very powerful. UCF will try to slow it down. Way back when they were in Conference USA, these teams met 3 times for in the conference championship game. And a few notes, and it's trivia time. I'm gonna give you some trivia here, Matt. But for a 7th time in 10 years, UCF is going bowling. Congratulations, Knights. Right now, they are enjoying the highest or the biggest turnaround from last year to this year. Of course, last year they were winless. This year they already have 6 wins. That's a +6 margin. 2 schools, which you may not get. They're not Power 5, but real quick trivia. 2 schools sit 1 game back with +5 game improvement so far this season.
I would say Hawaii.
No. They've fallen on.
And, oh man, that was...
this is a hard one. This is like the 1,000-point question on Jeopardy.
Wow. Tulane?
No. Eastern Michigan and Wyoming
Yes,
have both improved that. But in this game, I've been back and forth on UCF, but I'm taking UCF in this game because of the defense. But the offense is kind of starting to mature. They do get this game at home. If they're going on the road, I don't know that they'd be able to pick up a win in this. But UCF could be 5-2 in the American if they get this win. I'm taking the Knights to win this one.
Yeah, I think UCF wins this game, but I think this game is going to be super close. And maybe down to a field goal in that kind of range. Because, again, as you mentioned, UCF's defense has been one of the things that's impressed me the most the last 3 or 4 weeks. The ability to score from all over the field, not just with the interceptions, not with fumble recoveries. They had a punt block return for a touchdown last weekend. Just doing a tremendous job. I think the offense is still a work in progress. I mean, I think Mackenzie Milton's done a decent job dropping back as a passer, but I don't necessarily know if that's what Scott Frost wants this offense to be, just a passing offense. I think he would love to see that running game, maybe pick up some steam, but I think part of that is the offensive line has had some struggles at times getting some key blocks. So if UCF can avoid the turnover battle, if they can win that, if they can do what they've been doing the last couple weeks, I think UCF wins this game. But again, I think this is going to be a close game. Tulsa, I thought last year was a team that was going to have a great year. This year, we're seeing that. I think Philip Montgomery, as a coach, has done a great job. He's a name, much like Scott Frost, that you start hearing in coaching circles when it comes to other possible Power 5 jobs.
One benefit for UCF, Tulsa's defense, porous.
Yes. So they should be able to get score some points.
Not a shutdown D. Matt, I want to take you back to early October when there was a hurricane out on the horizon. We were all hunkering down, and LSU was to visit Florida. A beaten, ravaged LSU, head coach fired, no direction LSU, game doesn't happen. Now it's on Saturday, and it's in LSU, and the Tigers are suddenly playing better, and the Florida Gators come visiting. Florida LSU Saturday, 1 p.m. kick on the SEC network. A stupid stat, the earliest kick in the series in like 16 years. LSU has beat Florida 3 straight years. It's the longest winning streak against the Gators since the 70s. Florida looking to clinch its 2nd straight SEC East title. Last time they did that, a guy named Tim Tebow was the quarterback in Gainesville. The quarterback now is Stuart Appleby.
Austin Appleby.
Stuart
Appleby, I think, is a golfer.
That's right. Austin Appleby. See, I don't even know this guy. It's been a long week. Okay, folks. Austin Appleby. But 201 yards last week, 2 touchdowns, completion percentage through the roof, but turnovers, fumbles, and some issues there. Florida's still looking to get the offense rolling. Jim McElwain not happy with the offense and the turnovers and such. They go into LSU this weekend. I think the Tigers win this game. It opens the door for Tennessee to come back and somehow win the SEC East with 3 losses in conference. This is a game that would have been different in October, though. But I think LSU wins it this time.
Oh, for sure. This is a much different game if this game is played where it was supposed to be played in October. Right now, Florida would be getting ready for a Cupcake and Presbyterian and be getting ready to move
Senior
forward.
day and moving on.
Senior day and moving on. But that's not the case. I agree with you. I think LSU wins this game, and I've had some Florida fans who kind of shook their head at me when I said that. But listen, I'm going to point to the fact that this team has been much of the walking wounded the last couple of weeks. Against South Carolina, they lost a couple more players. Marcus May's now done. Brian Cox has been injured. They've got Luke Del Rio still out. We talked about Appleby coming in. I mean, this team, Austin Appleby. We talk about this team having 8 to 9 players, I think, listed on being out for this game. A handful of those coming from the defensive side. To me, that's just too much to overcome. Plus, you're on the road. Again, if this game is played in Florida, maybe a little bit of a different result. Right now, LSU is playing really well. A great combo. Running backs of Darius Geis and Leonard Fournette have done an amazing job. I think last week LSU rushed for over 300 and some yards. I think they'll do the same thing. I think Florida will be competitive in this game. I think Austin Appleby gives them a different dimension as a quarterback than Luke Del Rio does. We saw that last week. Had a couple great runs, was able to scramble outside the pocket, able to really kind of find some running room ahead of him. I just don't think I'll have that against this LSU defense. I think LSU wins. I think Florida, unfortunately, is going to have to watch someone else claim the SEC East this year.
So Florida won't get to go and get their backside handed.
I don't think it matters who from the East. To be honest with you, it could just be team inserted here, and there'll be a double-digit score, whoever, or double-digit line, whoever.
An SEC East All-Star team may have trouble against Alabama.
I don't think they.
Like
I still think it'd be a double-digit. I still think it'd be a double-digit line.
Put together the all-star team from the East. Florida State hits the road against Syracuse, and I don't think either of us are picking Syracuse. But just a few notes off of Florida State's win over Boston College. 40th consecutive winning season for the Seminoles. That's the nation's longest active streak. It began in 1977, back when bell-bottoms were in and disco and all that stuff. They also have, when they appear in a bowl this year, it'll be a all-time streak. It'll be tied 35 straight bowl games for Florida State. And since 2010, and this is my segue to what we're actually talking about Florida State, they rank only behind Alabama in total wins. Since Jimbo Fisher took over at Florida State, it is the second winningest program in college football. We are both picking Florida State to win. So my question to you, Matt, is Jimbo Fisher going to stay at Florida State, or is this LSU story mill has some legs?
I think it does have some legs. I think. Listen, I've said for a while here that I felt like if LSU wins out, even if they lose to Alabama, I felt like Ed Orgeron should get the job, just because he's done a pretty good job. They've done a good job resurgence with the offense. Look at what they've done with the rushing attack. But I think what LSU and their officials are saying is, hey, let's do our due diligence. Let's reach out to some coaches to see who might be interested. Larry Fedora's name was mentioned in this report. Jimbo Fisher's name was mentioned in this report. I wouldn't be shocked if Jimbo Fisher's reps have had discussions with LSU, maybe just seeing how interested he might be, and there might be interest there. I mean, again, if LSU can put together an attractive enough package financially, I mean, we're talking about maybe making Jimbo a $7 million coach, around what Nick Saban's making. I think it might be awful hard for him to turn that down. I know he's happy at Florida State, but again, we're talking about college football. It's a business. If the opportunities are there, maybe to go back to LSU where he was offensive coordinator, might give an opportunity maybe to try a new challenge and compete in the SEC and the SEC West, competing against guys like Nick Saban.
I don't know that LSU has the money that Jimbo.
No, it would have to come from a booster. It would have to come from someone like.
They don't have the money. I think that it would take to
sure.
get Jimbo. I think it's the smart move to make a play for Jimbo, but I don't know that the numbers are going to match up there. And he is happy in Tallahassee. It's a lateral move. It's probably the one lateral move he would make, though, because he does have fond memories of his time in Baton Rouge.
And I would also bring up the point, if you talk about, as many fans have pointed out, you talk about how difficult it would be to win. It's a lot more difficult to win in the SEC West, obviously, than it would be in the ACC Coastal. No offense to Clemson or to Louisville, but you look at what the West has been able to provide year in and year out. I think that's the only thing I would think that is the idea of going down memory lane, or the idea of maybe doing some fondness there, or the idea of maybe competing again, again the SEC and seeing if you get back there. But listen, Florida State's been competitive the last couple of years. They've been in the national title rate. So why would you leave a program where you've done a really good job recruiting?
Yeah, and kind of set it up. Next game we're going to pick quickly, Miami at NC State, 12:30 start. The Hurricanes bowl eligible for the 9th straight year after beating Virginia last weekend, and they've won 5 of the last 7 against the Wolfpack. And the Miami, they're Miami this year. They're not going to be back this year, but they're not going to be the fall apart after the Florida State game. Miami of years past. I have them beating NC State. I still think that Mark Richt is doing the right things, and the defense is better each week for Miami. I think they go to NC State, they win a game they should win, and I think you're seeing some of the foundation blocks being built for next year. So despite the long losing streak in the middle of the season, I still think things are going in the right direction for Miami, and obviously they'll do it this weekend at NC State.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they're going to win. I think he's done a good job. I think, again, it's always tough for a first-year coach to come in. I know Mark Richt's got the experience. I mean, there's nothing of that. But it's always tough for a first-year coach to come in and get his kind of system in place, get his players in place. Plus, Miami went through, similar to what Florida's went through a rash of injuries. They lost some players to suspension. When you lose that kind of situation, I think it's always tough to come back from.
USF SMU, this is on Saturday night. If the Bulls win out and Temple loses a game, USF wins a division. USF is averaging 44 points per game. That's the best in the American top 10 in the country. And ironically, UCF blowing the lead against Temple could end up keeping USF out of the championship game. But
and they may let them know that next week.
And they may let them. they may pay him back that way.
Yeah.
I think, the USF story is remarkable when you think back over a year ago where we were wondering if there were going to be a coaching change. Now we're wondering if there's going to be a coaching change because of upward movement. But I've got USF winning this one, and I don't know that Temple is going to lose, but the Bulls have really kind of hit their stride.
Yeah, I think USF wins this game as well. I think Chad Morris has done a good job at SMU. Again, like I just talked about with Mark Richt, I think it just takes time. I think when he's recruiting well, he'll get the type of players he needs in there. I think you look at what the ACC, the ACC West has become as a division, and you think about it. You got SMU, you got Tulsa, you got Memphis, you got Navy. Houston. It's really starting to become one of the toughest Group of 5 divisions out there. So it's interesting to see what happened. I think USF wins. I think it'll be interesting in the next couple of weeks. As you mentioned, Willie Taggart's name could be thrown out there. If there's some good jobs out there, especially if they get to that 9-10 win mark, I think there's some ideas where people say, hey, maybe we should bring him along. He's won 18 games, let's say, in the last 2 years. I think it's a good move for him.
And of course, next week, the big one, the war on I-4, whatever they call it.
We'll talk about that next week.
UCF. We'll talk about that next week. 4 games across the country, 3 of them that have our interest. One that's on our list, but we kind of talked a little bit about what I wanted to talk about, but we'll do it really quick. Number 2, Ohio State visits nemesis Michigan State on Saturday, 12 o'clock start. They've split the last 6 meetings. The true road team has won every regular season meeting since 2008, but Ohio State comes into this game. They're averaging over 46 points per game. That's second in the FBS. The defense, this was a stat that I thought was interesting. They've only given up 10 touchdowns. The defense has scored 6 touchdowns. The only team better than that, of course, is Alabama. I think they're up to 117 defensive touchdowns this year. Alabama scores every other defensive possession. But we're bringing this game up. We're both picking Ohio State, and we kind of talked about this earlier. But Ohio State suddenly finds themselves in somewhat of a driving position, but not in a driver's position.
No,
because they play Michigan State. They'll get Michigan at home next week. Michigan number 3 in the country. They could win out and be the number 2 team in the country. But as we talked about earlier, as things fall around them, different. You can't really predict what's going to happen. So now this game becomes not just a win. I think they need to win well against Michigan State, which is not something that they do against Michigan State. It's always a tough battle.
Yeah, but here's the funny part. Michigan State then goes to Penn State.
Yeah, they can spoil it.
Penn State. So this is 2 weeks in a row. Michigan State could play spoiler if they really wanted to. They could. You beat an Ohio State team and then you beat Penn State. I know you're not going to a bowl game, but hey, you know what? You've done something you probably no one thought you could do. I think Ohio State wins this game. I think they win convincingly. They have to win convincingly. I think they need to show that. But I don't know if there's anything really Ohio State can do outside of just winning it. Winning the remainder of their games, because it's really in someone else's hands. They really have to kind of hope that someone steps up and makes some plays and is able to, that their body of work is impressive enough to get themselves into that top 4 if it comes down to, we're starting to dissect, razor thin areas of statistics and things like that.
Yeah, it'd be tough to drop them from number 2, but crazier things that happen.
It could happen, and it could happen in the next couple. It won't happen this week, but it could happen the next couple weeks.
When the season began, first weekend, Houston beat Oklahoma. We had circled Louisville at Houston as the game to watch because that was going to be the make or break game for Houston. Well, now it's kind of an important game for Louisville. Thursday night game, 8 p.m. on ESPN. Houston looking to become the first program this year to beat 2 top 5 teams. Since they beat number 3 Oklahoma, then number 3 Oklahoma to start the year. But this game, it is all about the signal callers, and you have Greg Ward Jr. and Lamar Jackson, the only 2 players in the country that are averaging over 285 yards passing, over 40 yards rushing. They're 2 of the most dynamic quarterbacks. Obviously, Lamar Jackson is the guy that is probably the Heisman winner, but he's going against a Houston that has the 2nd rushing defense in the American. It is a good rushing defense. It is a good team. I am going against your grain on this, and I say Houston at home messes everything up even more so in the playoff rankings. They knock off Louisville. That defense shuts down Lamar Jackson, who's struggled a little bit. It took them 2.5 quarters to get going against Wake Forest. You can't do that against Houston. If they struggle out of the gate against Houston, they're going to be in a lot of trouble. The Cougs, they knock off the Cards.
Well, I think who would love that is Oklahoma. Oklahoma would love to see Houston beat Louisville because that just helps make their case a little bit because they lost to them, that they can help their way out. Listen, I think Louisville, the only way Louisville loses this game is if they just think that this is just an everyday average game and comes in and not prepared, because I think both of these 2 teams feel like this is a major, major statement game for them. They both need a win. Listen, Lamar Jackson looked human last week, only had 1 touchdown, if you can believe that. I think if he's going to come back and try to bounce back and showcase, if he has a big game against Houston, let's say they pummel Houston by 30 points and he scores 5 or 6 touchdowns, I think you might as well just forget the Heisman. It's going to be
just invite one person.
You might invite 2 people, and it's Lamar and his or maybe 3, Lamar and his family. Who knows? But again, I just like what Louisville's doing. I think last week was a little bit of a wake up call against a good Wake Forest team, but they saw how close things can slip away. And Louisville, listen, you could talk. And your fan base can talk all you want about deserving to be there, but if you lose this game, it doesn't matter.
When the season schedule came out, I know you and I both circled the Washington State-Colorado game as the game to watch. The other Cougars, Washington State, started the year, they lost Eastern Washington, they lost to Boise State, and they've won 8 games in a row. They're trying to be 8-0 in the conference for the first time in school history. They're looking for their first 9-game winning streak since 1930. Luke Falk is the active career leader in passing yards per game, and Colorado is the best passing defense in the country per attempt, giving up just 5 yards. The Buffaloes, just remarkable what they've done in Colorado this year. They get this one at home. They finish with Washington State and Utah. They have a half-game lead over USC, a game lead over Utah. If they win these 2 games, they're in the Pac-12 title game. This was Colorado.
Is this 1994? Are we back to
we're back in the 90s when they're and you know what? And I'm picking Colorado to beat Washington State in this game, and I'm confident in the pick because they've been getting it done both sides of the ball. That defense, especially against the pass, is going to be a real test for Falk. They get him at home. Colorado knocks off Washington State.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Colorado wins this game. I mean, listen, Mike McIntyre is going to win Coach of the Year. I just don't see anyone else really that could. Maybe if Scott Frost wins the next 2, you might throw his name as a possible, candidate in there. But I think the job that McIntyre's done has been outstanding. I mean, Colorado was kind of when they joined the Pac-12, it was just kind of like a giggle, from everyone that have them in there as a possible, W on your schedule. But now they've bounced back. McIntyre was a guy who a year or 2 ago people thought he was going to get fired. He was on a lot of hot seat lists because they just weren't, kind of winning right out of the gate. I think it's taken some time, but he's been able to do it. Listen, they did it towards the end of this season. They've done it this season as well, and they're doing it with their offense. I think they win this game. I think they beat Washington State, which then in turn, as we talked about, hurts Washington down the road because Washington has that big matchup with Washington State next week in the Apple Cup. They need Washington State to win this game, or else they're going to struggle a little bit when it comes down to making their case. If we're looking at that head-to-head strength of schedule on all those matchups.
Way back when we started this little thing we call a program, We said we'd get around talking about the Big 12, and we are. That's our game of the week. Number 9, Oklahoma visits number 14, West Virginia. Saturday night game, 8 p.m. on ABC. West Virginia, they've won 13 of their last 15. They've won 8 straight home games. They beat Texas despite turning the ball over 4 times last weekend. Oklahoma, they're going for their 15th consecutive Big 12 win. After losing to Houston and Ohio State in the first 3 weeks of the seaseason, they've bounced back. They're 7-0 in the conference. They lead the Big 12 in total offense, in scoring offense. West Virginia leads the Big 12 in scoring defense and total defense. Another might versus might. And the defense was enough for West Virginia last week because the offense kept turning the ball over. They get Oklahoma at home. I've been to Mountaineer Field. It's a tremendous place to watch a game. It's loud. It's crazy. It is as West Virginia as you can get. And I think Oklahoma is red hot, and they come in here and they stun the Mountaineers. I don't know if it's, I guess it's not stun, but I think that they win on Saturday night.
See, that's where I'm going to disagree with you. I think West Virginia wins this game. I think because this game's in Morgantown, I think because the fact that West Virginia's defense has played so well, they're pretty much the only team in the Big 12 this season that seems to play any defense. And I think they bounced back. Even though they won last weekend and you said they turned over the ball as much as they did, I think they bounced back from this. I think this is a huge game for them. You've got game day, that is going to be in Kalamazoo for the Western Michigan game this week. I think West Virginia fans are upset about that fact. They feel like they've been slighted by that. So I think it's going to be a raucous crowd. I think they're really going to turn out here for this game, and I think they're going to help them get this win. And then this throws the Big 12 even more into disarray, opening door for Oklahoma State possibly to get to make a case for the championship.
Just remember, Oklahoma State, they have a loss on their schedule on their record that they should not have had.
So there you go.
Everybody has admitted should not have happened.
Shouldn't happen. So if you like chaos, let's throw that in there as well. So I think West Virginia wins this game. I think it's going to be close. I don't think it's going to be anywhere near a blowout. And I think it's going to be a game that really it's going to help define Dana Holgorsen right now as he's looking to kind of move forward with that program.
And maybe West Virginia will finally get a little bit of respect.
Hide your couches, everybody.
And before we go, we do have a Facebook question, real quick, and it's more in my area. But does Iowa have any shot at playing in a Florida Bowl? Shannon Heaton with the question, and Iowa with the big win improves their standing in the Big Ten. I still have them heading out west for the Holiday Bowl in my bowl projections. They're out west already, and So I don't know that they're coming to a Florida Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're now to that point where you're seeing the individual bowl games start, coming out with their own who's left in their thought process, and it's interesting to see. And I think you'll hear some names that you might not think of, but then you realize that there's a pecking order, and eventually what happens is teams will take that based on that pecking order.
And the thing with the Big Ten, I spend way too much time on this. they have deals where they only take teams a certain amount of time. So in 8 years, they're only going to have a team they're going to have 6 different teams.
Yeah.
So Iowa they're not going to be back in Jacksonville. They're not going to be bowls that they've been in recently. So I have them going out to the Holiday Bowl.
That's a good bowl. It's not.
I think that's what it is. I don't know. It's
next
my
week.
bowl projections are online. Check them out at OrlandoSentinel.com. For Matt Murschel, I'm Brant Parsons. Thanks for catching our show. And next week, we're going to do this, I guess, right before Thanksgiving.
That's right.
Rivalry week, and we'll have our picks and everything then. So for Matt, I'm Brant. Thanks for watching, and keep following everything college football at OrlandoSentinel.com.